Good afternoon, Ms. Williams, and welcome. We appreciate your application, and we're awaiting you to begin your opening remarks.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon. It is my pleasure and honor to be able to appear before all of you all.
Oh, let me interrupt you once. I think you brought someone with you, did you?
I did not. I
Oh.
think someone snuck in behind me, but I did not bring anybody
Okay.
with me.
Then you don't have to introduce someone you don't know.
I unfortunately, all of my friends and family are well equipped on the internet, and so I'm sure they are watching instead of being here in person. But it is a privilege to be able to interview with you all today, and I wanted to begin by thanking you for your service on this commission. I have had the opportunity to meet with several of you over the past few weeks, and I cannot adequately express how impressed I have been with the amount of time and dedication that you all have spent with these application materials and the seriousness with which you are treating the job in front of you. And for that, the state of Iowa is going to benefit greatly, and I thank you for your service. Given that you all have spent so much time with our materials, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me to talk about my strengths. My strengths are summarized in my written submission, and I'm sure that you are all familiar with them. Instead, I thought it would be a best use of my time to address some of your concerns about moving my name forward as one of the three to the governor. Starting with, how can we possibly put somebody forward who has no prior judicial experience? And I think to answer that question, what we have to do is dissect what it is about prior judicial experience that is relevant to the role of a Supreme Court justice. I think first and foremost, it would be a familiarity with interpreting constitutional issues, issues of statutory interpretation, and issues of first impression. And not only dealing with those and addressing them, but writing about them. And I believe in this respect, I bring a breadth of experience to the bench. My work as a prosecutor involves significant appellate work. I submitted 2 appellate briefs to you as writing samples for your consideration so that you could get a flavor of my experience dealing with constitutional and statutory issues. And so in this respect, I believe that I do have relevant experience. I think that the other reason why prior judicial experience is relevant is because it gives you all a sense of the temperament of the individual and how they would make the transition from being an advocate to being a neutral. And while I don't wear a robe, I do believe that my work as a federal prosecutor also speaks to this. I know that this sounds hokey, and I know that those of you who I've interviewed with before in prior commissions have heard this story, and so I apologize for being repetitive. But I am privileged to wake up every day and go to work and do justice. I don't have a client. I'm not trying to win, and I'm not trying to negotiate the best settlement for somebody. My job is to do justice, to uphold the laws and the rule of law. And I would like to think that those are the same duties that sitting judges do every single day. I'm grateful I've had a defense attorney serve as a reference and write a letter of recommendation for me. I believe that some of you have informally spoken with defense attorneys that I work with, judges that I appear before. Because of my ethical responsibilities, I do not feel comfortable soliciting letters from attorneys that I have pending cases with or judges that I regularly appear before. And so I apologize for not being able to submit more formal letters to this commission about the type of lawyer that I am. But I will have to trust that the information that you all have before you is sufficient to give you a sense of my temperament and how I would be if selected for this position. Now, another concern you may have is how can we possibly vote to advance someone to the governor who doesn't practice in Iowa courts? And I would first take issue with that statement, because while I don't practice in a state courthouse, I believe that I certainly practice in Iowa and that I serve the people of Iowa. My job is serving Iowa communities. Vinton, Elgin, Hopkitten. I work for Iowans. One of the proudest moments of my career was after I concluded a case in Kyoto of a pretty violent individual, and I received a letter from the chief of police thanking me for my work. And he commented that so many of the town's residents had spoken to him about what a difference this had made, how their community was safer because of what we did. And what a really special experience to know that I am able to make my community better, that I can make my community safer, and that the work I'm doing makes a difference. And so I would take issue with anyone who says that I don't work for Iowan communities. Also importantly is that I'm an Iowan. I am fourth generation Iowan, and I am proudly raising the fifth generation of my family here. I left a out-of-state job that paid pretty well to come back home and continue my dedication to public service. And I feel very much a part of this state's legal community. Now, I had planned to use some time to address some other things, but I did have an opportunity to briefly talk to Justice Wiggins. I know that my application states that I'm pending admittance to the Iowa Bar, and I believe that Justice Wiggins has given you all an update on where the status of my application stands, and if he doesn't, he's certainly entitled to do that. Basically, we are waiting for the National Conference of Bar Examiners to return their background investigation. And it is, I believe, 61% complete.
That's correct.
I do know that something is getting turned in today, but it is not complete. However, I would cite to Chapter 31 of the Iowa Code, Us Lawyers Love Rules, and that is the admission to the bar, and specifically Rule 31-12, which discusses the necessary requirements to be admitted to the bar in connection with Rule 3113. And a background investigation from the National Conference of Bar Examiners is not a prerequisite and is not required to gain admission onto motion. I am qualified in every other respect under the rule, and I stand willing and able to be sworn in. I would be happy to stay this afternoon at the conclusion of the interviews and be sworn in by Justice Wiggins, so that
I can't do that without the information, but okay.
the rule specifically does allow you to do so. And I would cite to 3112-2. It talks that you must file the application with the National Conference of Bar Examinations through the online character and fitness application process, which has been done. I must pay a non-refundable administrative fee because we all love our fees. That's been done. And it says the character investigation services of the National Conference of Bar Examiners may be procured in all cases, but it is not a shall and it is not mandatory. And I would also note that the first sentence reads, the applicant must file the application with the National Conference of Bar Examiners through its online character and fitness application process, unless an exception is granted by the Office of Professional Regulation. And so while we are waiting for Wisconsin to do their thing, there is no reason why I cannot be sworn in as an Iowa attorney today or tomorrow, or certainly before Governor Reynolds has to make her selection. And so I would ask you all to not treat that as a barrier to my candidacy. Finally, another concern you may have is why now? How can we appoint someone so young to our state's court of last resort? And I don't think it's a sheer number of years that is relevant. It is what you have done in the years of practice that is significant. And I believe that I have a diversity of practice and background in my 14 years as an attorney that many people do not achieve after 30 years of practice. Civil, criminal, military, trial, litigation, appellate, state, federal, arbitration. This is a diversity of background of practice that is exceedingly rare. I would also bring to the bench a strong work ethic. I have told some of you in our interviews that I do not believe that this is a job that you should retire into. It is a job that deserves long hours, hard work, and dedication. One of the ways to do more with less is to work harder. I had my first job in 5th grade, where I woke up and delivered the Daily Iowan newspaper in Iowa City before school. I worked throughout high school, and I was on financial aid and scholarships at Smith, which meant I spent my first year working in the kitchen. As an Army private, I have logged countless numbers of KP, and I can tell you that I know how to clean a barracks top to bottom with a dirty rag, a toothbrush, and a bottle of Comet. I would bring this work ethic to the bench. This is a job that deserves a public servant, and I have committed my life to public service. I would be honored to be considered for this position as the next justice of the Iowa State Supreme Court, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. We're going to start with Ms. Pearson.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your application. You certainly have an impressive background. And when I met with you, you also talked about some additional areas that you have become involved with. And would you maybe share with others, if they are not aware of the violent crime area that you're working with in the Waterloo area?
Absolutely.
Program?
I serve as the office's Project Safe Neighborhood Coordinator, PSN. The federal government loves its acronyms. And one of Attorney General Sessions' focuses now is on reducing violent crime, specifically gun-related crime. And so as the PSN coordinator, I have begun working on a project in Waterloo to do just that, to reduce some of the violent crime. It is a multi-step or pronged approach towards reducing violent crime, which is not just enforcement. We are not going to prosecute our way out of these problems. It is heavily based on prevention, deterrence, outreach, and enforcement. And it brings together a collaborative group of stakeholders in Waterloo. We have local and federal law enforcement agencies, but we also have the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club on the task force, somebody from Family and Children's Services, Iowa Department of Corrections, community members, pastors, reverends, and it's bringing everyone. I told Ms. Pearson, I like to think of it as I'm setting a Thanksgiving table, and I'm trying to set that table as large as possible and bring as many people together to collaborate on the issues of gun violence up there, and I believe that's how we're going to solve that problem, or at least help make a dent.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowden?
Yes, thank you. You served 10 years in the Army Reserve and obtained the rank of captain. Could you tell me, one, why you chose the Army to join, and two, what skills do you believe that you learned while in the Army that would enhance your ability to be a justice?
Absolutely. So I enlisted in the Army in 1999 after my sophomore year at Smith had concluded. And Smith is a wonderful place, and I recruit for them now, but it is a place of privilege. And I don't care how you got to Smith College. If you're there, you're privileged as a result of being on campus. And I was at a point in my life where I wanted to give back and wanted to recognize this experience and this privilege that I possessed and try to give back to my community. And I grew up in Iowa, and every spring and summer, what happens? The rivers flood, and the National Guard gets called in, and we sandbag, and you build Red Cross shelters, and you help people when they need your help the most. And I thought, I can do that. That is something that I would be proud and happy to give my time to and to help my community. And so that was the impetus for joining the Army. What I've learned from that experience is not something that I can talk about in the 15 minutes that I have left. But I would say one of the things I did as a captain was work in a legal service organization. And so my job was to help eligible retirees, dependents, and soldiers with legal issues that they may be facing. And that could be a landlord-tenant dispute on post. That could be writing a will or an estate, helping with estate matters, helping with the adoption of a child, or maybe the divorce of a couple if there were no children involved. And so I had the opportunity to work with and help people. And that gave me an understanding of how and who interacts with our judicial system. They're not cogs in this wheel that we attorneys should push through into the litigation. These are real people. And often the issues that they're dealing with are the most important issues that they are facing at that time. And as a lawyer, it's important to understand that, recognize it, and treat them with the respect that they deserve.
Mr. Becker? Mr. Diaz?
Just a question or two.
Or two?
Well, I'm going to try to see if I can combine all this together. Your background says you were in Washington from 2004 to 2010. You've been in the state of Iowa now 8 years. You did not make, I don't know if you were eligible for partnerships, if you maybe can comment on whether you're eligible for partnership in your firm in Washington. And then the next question sort of comes with that is, why wait 8 years to apply for an Iowa license? Why not sort of anticipate, since this is going to be your home, that you're going to be here, you're going to be part of the bar, so forth?
Sure, great questions. My firm in Seattle, you became eligible for partnership after your 7th year of practice. So I was on a partnership track, and I certainly was being considered. I had significant originating dollars that was hard to walk away from. But that's why I wasn't made partner at Williams Gassner's, because I was not eligible based on my years of practice. Why haven't I joined the Iowa bar? I grew up poor, and I had a single mom. And it cost a lot of money. It cost almost $2,000. And, I have 2 kids, and my husband teaches public school. And that's a lot of money for us, even now in my life. And so, do I wish that I would have joined 5 months ago so this did not have to be an issue for the commission, or 5 years ago, or 6 years ago? Yes, absolutely. But I didn't delay because of this sense of I'm not part of the Bar Association. That's certainly not why I delayed. And I, in fact, started the process before this announcement even became public. I believe NCBE received my completed application on May 15th, so they've had it for quite some time. But it was not out of a sense of not wanting to be a part of this community. It was about a sense of making tough financial decisions for my family and how I want to set my children up for the future, and weighing costs and benefits.
Dr. Taylor? Mr. Bevel?
Nothing.
Ms. Sinclair?
No questions.
Ms. Diekma?
Just one question. I thank you for your service in the military. When we talk about service and our justices, we believe that they should be providing service, and they deal with all the Iowans. Regardless of the Iowa licensure issue, have there been any public service things that you have done in the legal community in Iowa that you could point to?
Absolutely. So DOJ prohibits us from being involved in a lot of activities. They call them outside activities, and we have to get them approved in advance by a bean counter in DC. So unfortunately, I'm not as involved as I would like to be. I think I was very involved in Washington, and you can see that on my papers. But I did get approved, and I have had the pleasure of being the attorney coach for the Iowa City High School mock trial team. My husband teaches at City High, and so we are a husband and wife coaching team. And it is such a wonderful experience because I think a lot of people believe that mock trial is a way to form future lawyers, and it's not. It's about teaching respect and civility in the legal process to high school students. And it has been so wonderful. It is a long season for us. We start in August and we run through March, and we practice every weekend. And so we pack up our kids and we practice at Iowa City, and the 3- and 5-year-olds are so excited. They're like, it's mock trial, kids. It's time for the mock trial, kids. But working with high school students and teaching them about the law and civility and what we do has really been incredibly rewarding. I also volunteer for the law school as much as I can. I do alumni recruiting for the University of Iowa, for the College of Law, to their incoming applicants. I serve as a AA judge, a appellate advocacy judge, and a mock trial judge for the college team. So I try to get involved as much as I can in the legal community.
Thank you.
Mr. Sukup? Thank you. What areas of your private practice would you say helped you prepare to be a justice?
That's a wonderful question. I think that my breadth of experience in litigating in different venues. So I have state court experience, I have federal civil experience in a federal jury trial, and then I've done significant work in arbitration. And so understanding how all of those processes interact with each other and how they're different from each other certainly has helped me. I would also say when I was in Washington, I served on the State Rules and Procedure Committee and was charged with, back then we did not have e-discovery rules. And so I, along with the committee, wrote the first group of e-discovery rules for the state of Washington. And going through that rule-making process and learning and delving into how the court rules interact with what we do on a daily basis, I think is certainly relevant experience for this position.
Thank you. Mr. Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams, I'd like to know a little bit more about your work at William Kastner. Could you just tell us quickly about some of the cases you were involved in, size and type and outcomes?
Absolutely. My federal civil jury trial was a 6-week jury trial and involved a products liability claim regarding my client who allegedly manufactured products containing asbestos. And so that was some of my significant experience. That unfortunately resulted in an over $10 million verdict for my client, which was the largest asbestos verdict in the state of Washington at that time. However, the trial judge, Judge Lasnik, who I respect very much, made some erroneous Daubert findings, and we appealed that case up to the Ninth Circuit, won, and it was remanded for a new trial on appeal. And a lot of the work that I did, drafting the motions and limines about it was an expert witness issue, was the foundation for getting that judgment reversed. I also represented for-profit private universities and colleges, as well as some medical device manufacturers who were being sued by plaintiffs and product consumers.
And you're a bit shy and perhaps humble to admit this, but can you confirm for this audience that you were one of 4 finalists to fill the position in the Northern District for the U.S. District Court?
I was. That's very nice of you, Mr. Goodman. He's had the opportunity to interview me before, but I did. This is not the first judicial position that I've put my name in for. I did put my name in for the vacancy that was created upon Judge Linda Reed retiring, and I had the privilege of that commission and Senator Grassley forwarding my name to the White House and getting to go out to the White House and interview with the folks out there in D.C. for that position.
Thank you.
Mr. Bloom?
Well, I know when I read your application initially, I saw the JAG responsibility in the Army, and I was talking with you about that, and I believe you commented that you had earned the rank of sergeant prior to getting your law degree. Could you comment a little bit on that?
I can. I enlisted as an E3 as a private, but I was able to become a non-commissioned officer before I commissioned over and I was a sergeant. That was the proudest moment of my military career. I have a lot to say about how officers are trained and how they're treated in the Army, but I think a sergeant earns that rank through hard work and respect of their unit. And so that was my proudest moment. The saddest part about commissioning over was losing that rank and not being able to lead my peers.
Thank you.
Ms. Conover? No questions. Mrs. Roberts? Mrs. O'Brien? No questions. Mr. Harbaugh?
Thank you for your application. I think you and I both would agree for your future, this 25 minutes is very important to you.
I would agree with that.
And I just want to note, it's really not a question, but I just want to note that all the candidates have been using that 25 minutes to talk or persuade all of us about them. And you used a couple of very valuable minutes to designate and let us know about what the law says on something. I just want to know if you're appointed to the Supreme Court, would you continue to do that from behind the bench?
The reason that I spent that time is because I believe that it was necessary, because I think that that is an issue weighing on some of the commissioners' minds. If I was on the bench, I would not use time in writing or at oral argument to unnecessarily make any type of legal point. One of the justices that I respect the most is Sandra Day O'Connor, and it is because of the principles that she adopted, not because she's the first woman on the Supreme Court, but because of the type of judge she was, and that she understood the principles of the rule of law, of social contract, and federalism, and narrowly addressed the issue in front of her, and not any of the issues that she could have perhaps addressed. And that's the judicial philosophy that I would bring to the bench.
No further question, just clarification on my statement. I was asking you about, I was happy that you were teaching us about the law.
Oh.
Okay, that was my point.
No one's ever happy when I teach them about the law, so I appreciate that.
Although the light's on, John, do you have any questions, Mr. Gray? Okay, Ms. Williams, I really appreciate your appearance today, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.